Welcome back to Dark Souls 3, everyone. We are, regrettably, still in Farron Keep, and regrettably, still on the patch that makes everything lag a little. It's not terrible, but it's definitely noticeable, even in recordings, and I apologize for that, but the nature of this game makes re-recording very difficult. If I wanted to be an annoying... I'm not even sure what the right word is. If I just wanted to be annoying, I could say that this is the Dark Souls of doing a Let's Play, but I'm not going to say that. All I'm going to say is that I wish that From Software, after all of these years, could put out a mostly working game. At any rate, exploring the swamp is still a chore, but there are some very nice goodies to be had, like that precious undead bone shard. Thus far in the game, those have been rather uncommon, and thus our Estus heals have been a little on the weak side. I can't fault this area for its sound work. It is quite disgusting. Never underestimate a ladder. The Wolf's Sword Bloodgrass, or the Wolf's Blood Swordgrass, whichever one it is a special Covenant item that we'll talk about a little bit later. Like in the Aden settlement, we can find a pot of Estus stew brewing here, as well as a Sunlight Talisman. And a glimpse of a rather terrifying creature in the distance. We'll deal with them soon enough. One can only hope that we will find out who is making these brews and leaving these things behind relating to sunlight. At this juncture, I'm trying to conserve as many focus points as possible because I will have need of them very shortly. One of the benefits of caressing tears is that it's actually very cheap. Much cheaper than poison moss clumps. We've got a better view now of the terrifying beastie roaming the swamps. And as best I can make out, it appears to be a very dirty, oily cleric beast from Bloodborne. These enemies are very dangerous. However, they're also very weak to fire. Their giant tree trunks serve as both a powerful club and a catalyst of sorts. They can summon those little homing skulls at you, which are quite difficult to evade in these treacherous conditions, and they can just beat you over the head. Doing a bit more quick-stepping now that at least one of those monsters is out of the way. Without powerful pyromancy, they're very difficult to take on. Not impossible, but difficult. Oh good. Yellowfinger Hazel is back for another round. Unfortunately, our visibility and mobility is quite limited in this area, even more so than the swamp up above. Hazel also likes to use the obscuring ring, which makes her difficult to see. So, honestly, the best thing to do at this juncture is simply either wait for her to come to you, or move on and deal with her as it comes. Given that the camera is running, I decided that one of these options was better than the other for purposes of viewing. If she wants to find me, she'll find me. This is our ultimate goal, as you may recall, this large stone door with the torches. We don't yet have all of them lit, but we will soon enough. We still have some exploration to do before we can move on. And while I have resolved to keep moving in this area, I'm still a little bit paranoid about Hazel blindsiding me. I also decide, for safety's sake, to equip my moss clumps, just in case I run out of FP and really need to get that poison going. Shouldn't happen, but it could. Ah, there she is. You can actually see her magic effects before you can actually see her. Such is the power of the Obscuring Ring. A very handy thing to have in PvP, though we won't have access to it for quite some time. We're significantly better equipped now to deal with Hazel than we were back in the Road of Sacrifices. Though, we also have to deal with this troublesome Gru. Hazel's soul darts can add up, but they also have the drawback of not doing very much damage individually and not staggering you very much, so you can actually just sort of sippy tank through it if you are so inclined. I have never seen her get poisoned from the swamp, but it might be possible if she spends enough time in it. Either way, it's a bit of a moot point. She goes down without too much trouble this time, as opposed to the last time we fought her where she was considerably more dangerous. As a reward, we get some souls, and more importantly at the moment, a refill on our restorative items, effectively giving us some more effective range of exploration here. Of course there's a crab. Crabs have a habit of popping up in the worst places. However, there's a trick to this particular crab that you can take advantage of. If you're being observant, and if I ever turn my camera, you might notice that we are in the vicinity of a white birch tree. And a white birch tree means that our giant friend will help us out with a steady supply of giant arrows. Since we've befriended him, the arrows won't harm us, but they will do quite a number on Mr. Crab. This is far and away the easiest crab to kill in the game, provided that you've befriended the giant, which you should literally always do no matter what. If only just to get rid of this asshole. Because he drops the Lingering Dragon Crest Ring, which is quite helpful. And there's also just some general goodies scattered around here that are nice to grab. It's been a while since we've seen a pine bundle, so I figure I should at least go over that again. Bundles are like resins, however they apply very quickly, but last only a few seconds. To be honest, I've never found much use for them, but any port in a storm, if it hits an elemental weakness, it hits an elemental weakness. You do burn through them quite fast, though. Now that's an interesting item. The Crown of Dusk. It will greatly increase the magic damage that we do. It's more or less required for characters that want to deal damage with sorcery. It also has some interesting lore implications. As do the curious visitors the Gru have at their camp here. These mushroom men are somewhat infamous from the first Dark Souls for their unassuming appearance and their incredible right hook. they're also kind of cute. Unfortunately, they appear to have become prey for the Gru, and thus are all dead. Indeed you do not, Mushroom Men. One of them holds a present, the Sage's Scroll. We know somebody who really rather wants this, and we have no reason not to oblige them. Up here is another incredibly difficult encounter if you do it the wrong way. There are actually 3 of those cleric beasts up there. If you aggro them all at once, you're probably going to lose. However, if you only grab one at a time, kite them back to this fairly safe area, provided that you've cleared it, then they're not too difficult, especially if you have some powerful fire attacks at your disposal. Even if you are not strictly a pyromancer, fire bombs and the like will also do a reasonable job at damaging them from a distance. Attacking them with melee weapons is not impossible, but it's quite difficult because they have high poise and don't stagger easily. Combustion and the like are risky, but they do a hell of a lot of damage in a very short amount of time, so it's a fairly safe bet, provided you don't overcommit. Since there's only one left, I feel comfortable taking this guy on in his home turf. For defeating them, we get Ferris's bow, Ferris's hat, and a poison gem. Honestly, the stuff that the monsters drop is much more valuable than the poison gem. Ferris's black bow is a returning item from previous games, and is probably the best short bow in the game. Well, actually it's more of a long bow. Non-great bow, I guess. Standard bow. Bow that a normal human being could use. It has very high dexterity scaling and a couple of neat tricks to it. If you want to go for an archer kind of character, it's your best bet. Though, a case can be made for the composite bow because of its better weapon art. The special tri-shot the black bow of Ferris does is cool, but it's not very useful. At any rate, that is one area of the swamp cleared out. We are slowly but steadily making progress. Our next destination, however, lies above the swamp. We ignored this ladder previously because I had things to accomplish, but now I am more than comfortable ascending. If you are going through this game for your first time, I would actually recommend making a beeline for this ladder. The route isn't terribly dangerous, and up above is a very handily placed bonfire, as well as a puppy. Before we explore this area, there are a couple of things that I want to accomplish back at Firelink. We're carrying a reasonable payload of souls around, so for safety's sake, let's go back and take stock. Hope that nobody has noticed our altercation with Yuria.
Speak then.
This is why we're primarily back. I want to show off this mechanic of the game. Healing the Dark Sigil. It's quite pricey, and it only goes up the more that you level up in the game. So if you try to cure it at the end, you can be looking at a very, very significant chunk of souls for what essentially amounts to a cosmetic thing.
Welcome home, speak.
Still, I want to show it off regardless. I've always been bad with my money. Now, we have nothing to fear from the Dark Sigil. We can no longer go hollow, meaning that our precious ashen skin will remain that way and not turn into gross beef jerky. While we have a moment, I'm equipping some new armor, such as the Crown of Dusk, which looks kind of silly but is very useful, and the Dark Wraith armor, which is basically what Reaper would wear if he played this game. Now let's not keep our friend waiting any longer.
I suppose this means you're after sorceries. Oh my. This is stupendous. And the undead legion of Farron possesses sorceries quite unknown. Thank you for upholding your end of the bargain. I doubt I ever would have made this discovery alone. Now, let us unravel the thing, so you may put these new sorceries to use.
Let's take a look. Regrettably, the sorceries offered by this scroll are not particularly great, but some of them are fairly, at least novel, like Pestilent Mercury. We're a little low on funds.
Oh, I have something for you. You're a fine sorcerer now, no mistake. You should have something to prove it. Go on. If I'm giving something away, you'd better well take it.
The Young Dragon Ring is what we would have started with if we started with the Sorcerer class. Like the Great Swamp Ring, it boosts the power of sorceries. It is, like the Crown of Dusk, a fairly mandatory item for a sorcery-centered build. Not so much for pyromancers, but we're branching out into all sorts of things with this character. We also have something for Andre.
Ah, 'tis good, wasn't he?
In addition to reinforcing our flasks, we also have a coal to give him.
Well, well. What's the Undead Legion doing with a coal such as this? I'd heard one of the Crystal Sages had sided with Farron's Abyss Watchers. I suppose it must be true. You should know, this coal is imbued with magic. First one I've ever seen. Hardly a surprise, is it? I've never been one for books or wise men.
Despite his professed lack of affinity for the magical arts, Andre can still infuse our weapon with magic without much trouble at all now that he has that coal. It's a nice thing to pick up. Though we're still at the point where infusions are not especially helpful. Unless they're like raw or something. That concludes our business at Firelink for the time being. Despite his haughty attitude when we first met him, Orbeck is actually quite the gracious host. Provided that we do what he asks, he is more than happy to continue to provide us with sorceries and nice shiny things. The emaciated wolf of Farron, as it is called, is not actually dead. It is instead a covenant thing. Farron's watchdogs is essentially what allows you to invade in the Road of Sacrifices up by the entrance to Farron Keep. We saw a couple of those phantoms when we were going through there. It's sort of an oddly placed covenant, to be honest. If you don't know about it, it's honestly kind of difficult to get here at a level wherein you can still reliably invade in that area. But if you know it's there, it's not too hard to get to. More importantly, for most players, is the Dream Chaser's Ashes, which we can turn into the Handmaiden for a bunch of handy things. Most importantly, buyable Titanite shards. If you like to experiment with weapons, or you're simply indecisive, that is an invaluable service. And honestly, another reason to just simply make a beeline for this area the first time you get the opportunity. It doesn't really flow for an LP though, so I decided to do it a more standard way. This broken bridge is an optional area, but it has some very valuable things in it, including this large, unhappy customer. In a decision that will in no way come to bite me in the butt, I decide to equip the cleric's candlestick. Series veterans may actually recognize this fellow as a somewhat craggy version of the Asylum Demon. Or, more accurately, the Stray Demon. He's a fairly powerful foe, though he does have a bit of a weakness to sorcery. However, he does not have a weakness to ranged attacks. That boulder spit that he does is honestly the most dangerous attack that he does, except for one. I have not found a reliable way to actually evade it. It might go better if you have a shield. What you really want to do is try and bait him into butt stomping. This is his most dangerous attack. It comes out extremely quickly, and if you don't wriggle out of it, he can and will toss you right the fuck off the bridge, which is instant death. So, if you happen to get caught, which you probably will if you go in close, which is, preferable to getting killed by boulders, be sure to mash on basically every control button that you have. Hopefully you'll break free before you get tossed away. Pretty much every move this guy has does a lot of damage, so there's not really a safe place to stay. It makes sense that this variant would be the Stray Demon. There's no asylum here. There's not much of anything here. That Great Axe is quite the find for strength-related characters. It does a lot of damage. It takes a ton of strength and endurance to wield effectively, though, and it's really heavy to boot. The real prize up here was the Stray Demon's soul, however. We can show that to Ludlik, and he will give us some very nice things in return, if we are so inclined. We're not quite done up here, though. There's a whole other area behind if you are feeling adventurous. And if you weren't feeling adventurous, you probably wouldn't be up here in the first place. The first thing you'll notice about this section of the bridge is that there's an abundance of crystal lizards. They drop large titanite shards. As of now, those are still quite rare, so any drop of those is welcome. We also get the lightning spear miracle, which I might play around with later. Given that it's on the corpse in front of a dead dragon, it's not a stretch to imagine that, while wielding the Dragon Crest shield, some valiant knight fell in battle against the beast. Yeah, I really don't have time for you. Please leave. There we go. The last crystal lizard drops a heavy gem, which increases the weapon's strength scaling. A heavy great axe, for instance, is quite the force to be reckoned with. Even though he was blocking, Great Combustion did quite a bit of damage to him. Unsurprisingly, a wooden shield doesn't do much against fire. Works pretty well against small arms like swords, though. all in all, a worthwhile diversion. To get back to the other side safely, you just need to drop down from up here. It's a bit murky, but okay, that's a pretty nice view nonetheless. I should mention, the Dark Wraith armor that we're wearing is classified as medium armor. It's on the heavier side of that category, but it's not anything that will break the stamina bank. It offers pretty good defense against most things. It also appears to have thorns growing out of it, which is sort of Kirk steel, so they might want to settle that out of court. Regrettably, we must once again brave the muck and mire. And these slugs have an obnoxious habit of spawn camping this ladder. The best way to deal with that is simply slide down. The speed at which you fall will actually do a little bit of damage and stagger them. And if you miss one, hopefully you can roll away in time. We're going to be wanting that quick step again. Ugh, gross. If nothing else, the cleric beasts at least aren't as durable as the stray demon was. Individually, the homing skulls don't do very much damage, but as you can see, they very rarely come one at a time. On occasion, the cleric beast will drop the stone great shield, which is a fairly powerful but extremely heavy great shield. If you have the stats invested, it's worth picking up, but since we emphatically do not, I decided that it would be best to give it a miss. Oh good, here it comes. This is the last variety of enemy that you will find here, and it is the ever-lovely Basilisk. Basilisks are largely unremarkable except for their unique appearance and the noxious gas that they spew that curses you. Once the meter fills up, curse is instant death. Fortunately, unlike in Dark Souls 1, being cursed does not halve your HP. Dying will take away your Ember bonus, but that can be regained easily enough. I make a brief switch in armor here for anti-curse itemization, just in case. And we can continue on our merry way in our very nice looking Pope robes that are about to get filthy. In this little cave we find the Golden Scroll and the Antiquated set. And while the game doesn't necessarily tell you, that is actually all of the bottom and body pieces for the Crown of Dusk. That familiar looking mushroom there gives us about all the evidence that we need to conclude that this place used to be Darkroot Basin, which in turn used to be the ancient township of Ulasil, from where Princess Dusk and Elizabeth the Mushroom hailed. Why this has happened to that area is anyone's guess, but in Dark Souls the general rule of thumb is that things get worse, they don't get better. The golden scroll that we found in that cave teaches the golden sorceries, which are known for being from Ulasil. They don't do damage or scale from intelligence, but they offer a variety of useful effects nonetheless. Orbeck will be no doubt pleased to see it all the same. This is another one of those nasty fuckers from before that jump on your head. Best to take them on from a distance if you can. They're easily recognizable by the fact that they don't carry a weapon, which makes them dangerous? I don't really understand it either. Sometimes Kung Fu is the strongest weapon. Herein we find the last light we need to extinguish, underneath a relief of 4 kingly-looking fellows. That makes each light represent a boss from Dark Souls 1. The 4 kings, Gravelord Nito, and the Bed of Chaos. Why they chose these 3, I'm not entirely sure. The 4 kings makes a bit of sense, given that the Abyss Watchers are all about watching the Abyss, from which the 4 kings hail, but Nito and the Bed of Chaos are sort of just notable figures in history at this point. I guess I can't begrudge them the chance to inscribe a bunch of skulls on a rock. That's pretty cool. Regardless of their choice of decor, the door to the Abyss Watchers is now open. We won't be going in just yet. There are 1 or 2 more things to pick up. Regrettably, they're in the Basilisk area, so best to go in prepared. Basilisks are not particularly dangerous foes on their own, but they do really like to come in groups, and visibility here is really not great. Not only is visibility poor, mobility is poor as well, meaning that it's easy to get caught up in the curse gas. They're also just durable enough to survive a single great combustion, which is annoying. If you go through this area recklessly, you can very easily get swarmed by a bunch of enemies with the capacity to kill you instantly. As such, caution is recommended. Here we are. This is what I wanted to have happen. This will only happen if you make Yuria mad and or dead. The Pale Shade of Lundor will invade. He is a fairly wily foe, with access to both dark sorcery and a wicked set of claws, as well as some throwing knives that don't do anything. Now, if you get hit by any of his attacks, it will hurt. However, he is very weak to shields. His throwing daggers and his claws will do very little stamina damage to a raised shield, even with charged up attacks. If you simply block then counterattack, he doesn't have an awful lot he can do in return. He does have the Dark Hand, but I have never seen him use it offensively. I'm sure it's possible, but he prefers just attacking. As for Affinity, his single offensive spell, the best way to deal with it is just hide behind a tree. It can bust through shield defense pretty easily, but the environment itself actually helps you out here. For our victory, we get a pair of mannequin claws. As far as I know, this is the only place to get them, and they are... well, they're a bit niche in application, but they're useful for some PvP builds, and they're kind of cool. With the defeat of the Pale Shade, our business here is largely done. So we'll just frog hop our way back to a bonfire, pick up Iron Flesh, and dream of the days where we didn't have to go through this dreadful swamp. Next time, we'll see if we can settle accounts with the proprietors of this fine place. Until then, a pleasant journey.